But one of the things that really was critical when I look back over my life, right? Because it's like these milestone birthdays, we always look back at like, what have I accomplished thus far in my life? And I can say, like really, the Lord has blessed me exceedingly abundantly above all that I could ask, think, or imagine. But it was often because I remember those moments where it was like that childlike faith where I just asked for the craziest things. And God, right? And God is not a genie, but God in his wisdom and in his goodness and his kindness did give me those things that I had the courage to ask him for. I'll give a couple of examples. One was traveling to over 20 different countries before I was 30 years old.
Welcome back to Relatable Wisdom, the podcast where everyday people share the quotes that have shaped their lives, inviting us all to reflect and grow together. Today we're joined by Kathryn Booker Veloz, an executive coach and leadership strategist whose journey spans international development and high-stakes leadership. With a unique blend of resilience and insight, Kathryn has dedicated her career to helping others navigate the complexities of leadership and organizational culture. Let's dive into Kathryn's world and discover the quotes that she has to share with us today. Tell me your name and what you do.
So thank you again, Wisdom, for having me on your show. My name is Kathryn Booker Veloz, and I'm an executive coach and leadership strategist. And my main goal is to work with rising managers and leaders and senior executives who are really trying to navigate toxic workplace environments, grappling with low morale, low trust. They're really trying to figure out, their reputation management, trying to fix artificial harmony within their teams and organization. And so this is something I'm extremely passionate about. I'm a former federal employee and I had the pleasure of working with, over, 300 U.S. diplomats and senior federal executives to really help them, identify practical tools on how to overcome, toxic culture, the low morale, navigating different cultures within the workplace, right? We are in an ever evolving multicultural environment in the majority of our workplaces, I would say. And so one of my main goals was to work with folks to identify and to get to that other side of prosperity, clarity, confidence, and efficiency. So, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Can you share with us your favorite quote?
Yeah. So, I love this question. My favorite quote is actually by Oprah Winfrey says it the most. But it goes like this. You get from this life what you have the courage to ask for. And I'll repeat it. You get from this life what you have the courage to ask for. By Oprah Winfrey. And yeah, I love it so much.
What does that mean?
So to me personally, this quote actually dovetails really nicely. I'm a believer. I love Jesus Christ. And it dovetails with this Bible verse. It's Matthew chapter 7, verse 7 through 8. And I'll just read it too. But it says, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. And then verse 8 goes on to say, for everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks, it will be opened. And so, to me, the quote that Oprah Winfrey says that I love is also just a direct compliment and really pulls from the biblical text of Matthew 7, verses 7 through 8. But to me, what it actually means is in order to produce the life that we want, it's going to require a level of courage and audacity to believe that what we want can be attainable. And some people may call this a level of crazy faith or, a faith that goes beyond what you could ever imagine. But to me, so much of my life has been predicated on this quote of you get from this life what you have the courage to ask for. And, I'm 30 years old. I don't mind sharing that. Just turned 30 years old and.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
Hope you send me the birthday cake.
Thank you, Wisdom.
Yeah.
But one of the things that really was critical when I look back over my life, right? Because It's like these milestone birthdays, we always look back at like, what have I accomplished thus far in my life? And I can say like really the Lord has blessed me exceedingly abundantly above all that I could ask, think, or imagine. But it was often because I remember those moments where it was like that childlike faith where I just asked for the craziest things. And God, right? And God is not a genie, but God in his wisdom and in his goodness and his kindness did give me those things that I had the courage to ask him for. I'll give a couple of examples. One was traveling to over 20 different countries before I was 30 years old. That was a wild dream that I had when I was a, teenager. I was the first person in my family to ever go out of the country. And I not only traveled to over 20 countries before 30, God allowed me to also coach some of the top most senior U.S. diplomats in these foreign countries, like in the Asia region, different countries in Africa, really all over the world, and to be able to provide my, different perspective because I'm a millennial. But what I've also found is that a lot of leaders appreciate a different perspective from a generation that will eventually take their place, right? And a lot of those very, very senior positions, millennials, Gen Zs will eventually get to that step. But what I found is, having that ability to travel, to see, to learn about different people, how they live, their way of life, their culture, their food, their mannerisms. Um, I'll also say that this quote has applied to me, right? You get from this life what you have the courage to ask for. I was accepted to be a U.S. Peace Corps volunteer, and I served in the Dominican Republic for 2.5 years. And it was a very challenging experience because for many people in the US, right, it's a challenge for us to, not have running water or not, have electricity or to not have, AC. And these are things that we take for granted. But what it really taught me, that whole Peace Corps experience, was that actually human beings are more alike than we actually realize. We have more things in common. Like take away the superficial fluff, if you will, the niceties of having AC, running water, not needing to sleep under a mosquito net every day. But when I actually started to just interact with the people, human to human, it was this beautiful epiphany of the fact that we are more interconnected than people. I had to come back and teach a lot of people in my own country, a lot of people in my own family and the places I went to, that y'all don't think this American exceptionalism, if you will, as some people call it, needs to go out the window. We are all the same when it all boils down to it. And it's like this idea that we're better. Sometimes as people have this idea in America that we're better than other folks in different countries, but it takes a dose of humility to realize, no, we're all the same. And there's beauty in that. People reminded me of my family, my aunts, my cousins, even though they spoke Spanish. I'm the only one in my family that speaks Spanish, actually. But yeah, so this all in all, this quote has been so integral to my life, to my career, even as a young girl. Yes.
Yeah, one of the word that stands out in that quote is the word courage, right? So you get out of life what you have the courage to ask. Why does courage have to be in that sentence? Like, what does courage have to do with asking questions?
Yeah, I like that question a lot. I think when we're children, what I found, and just even observing my niece and my nephew who are 5 and 8 now. Little children, if we look at the children around us, if we have that privilege to just look at children and hear how they interact with adults and people, a lot of children ask just the most audacious questions, right? And it's like, and there's a level of curiosity that they have that is just so innocent and pure. And I think the unfortunate thing that tends to happen is that society, whichever society you find yourself in, I'll say for America specifically, but I've noticed it in other countries and societies as well around the world, that as you get older, that curiosity and that audacity tends to be almost, to be blunt, almost like beaten out of you. And you're almost conditioned to not be as curious, or you're almost conditioned to not be as courageous. And I'm going to throw out some phrases that folks may identify with, like, who do you think you are to ask that? You're crazy. That's never going to happen. Keep dreaming.
Yeah.
Or, uh, well, good luck, in this very sarcastic tone. Like, okay, I don't think that's ever going to happen, AKA, but you can keep going that direction. And so it's like these little moments, right, throughout our lives. And I think it even starts, right, going into maybe elementary, middle school, high school, and so on and so forth, where society begins to tell us you need to dream smaller. You can't think as big as you want to. And I think, to me personally, what I've found from my specific situation, and I would encourage the audience to employ this as well, right? But it takes courage to push back against even the naysayers. If there are people in your circle right now, like, I would encourage people to pause this podcast as they're listening to it and write down a list of people who, every time you get around them, they say the most negative things. They say very sarcastic, comments to you when you present them with an idea, or when you say, hey, I want to live in this house one day, this beautiful big house, or I want to go to this country one day that, maybe seems beyond your means. I want you to make a list of all of the people who, maybe instead of responding back with, oh, yes, you can do it, I believe in you. Let's either pray on this, or let's set our intentions to believe that this is going to actually happen. If you don't have people like that, even if it's your own family, write it down and then begin to take stock of, okay, I'm going to dare to have the courage, right? The ability to believe beyond my wildest dreams, right? To really step into that innocence of belief and curiosity and wonder. And, with those people that you've noted as being the negative speakers, mark them, right? But then either keep that dream to yourself or speak it out loud every day in the mirror, write it on sticky notes. And I would also encourage you, if you do have people, right, do another column who you can write down, speak positive things to you. They speak life. They encourage you. They want you to achieve your biggest dreams, right? Have those people listed, and maybe only share your wildest dreams and the audacious ideas with those people. And if you don't have those people, it's okay, but just continue to profess that out of your own mouth. Because you're not silly, you're not ignorant, you're not confused, you're just a dreamer. And I think oftentimes God has God ideas and God dreams that He places in us even before we're born and sent to earth. I believe this so strongly, that God is waiting to unveil throughout our lifetime. And so we are on this earth for a very short period of time. Why not have the courage and the boldness to stretch beyond what society has conditioned us to be and do and say, and really believe for more in your life?
That is a comprehensive guide to be courageous to ask life what we want out of it. Now, recently I had the opportunity and the privilege to have a conversation with a guest, and one of the things she said was, every complaint is a poorly worded request. And in the context of this, of your quotes, most times people complain about life. And it had me thinking, right, to start asking myself that, wait, instead of complaining and saying, I should ask myself, what's the request I want? And then ask myself, who should I make this request to? Am I making this request to God? Am I making it to my mom? Am I making it to my dad? Like, depending on the context of the situation, right? I'll give an example. If let's say, there's a hissing background noise coming from your end. I'm just giving an example. Of course, your audio is perfect.
Yeah.
But instead of complaining that, no, this curse is terrible and all those stuff and those things, I should ask myself that, okay, wait, the background noise is terrible. Okay, instead of complaining that, this is bad and stuff like that, I should ask myself, who can I make the request to? And say, is there something we could do about the noise? Can you turn whatever it's making that noise off, or can you go to a different room so we can record, right? And same thing in terms of life. People complain instead of making requests, and I don't, I don't really know why that will be the case, but probably because it's easier to complain, probably because it's easier to put the blame on someone else. Making a request requires quote unquote courage, because now you're doing something about it.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That is so true. I mean, to your point, wisdom. I love what you said, that it is easier to complain. It's easier to be cynical. It's easier to be sarcastic. It's easier to not have to invest as much belief, if you will. Like if I'm a visual person, if we think of like, I don't know, like faith, like a bucket, like a jar, it's easier to, instead of putting coins of faith into that jar, it's easier to leave those coins outside of the jar and say, oh, it's never going to happen. I'm not going to invest this idea or this belief. It's easier for me to kind of sit on the sidelines and say, oh, and criticize other people who are actually trying. And that is unfortunately a sad reality that I've seen. It's almost like it's like a human condition that many people struggle with. Doesn't matter what country you're from or your upbringing, but it is easier to take the cheap way out, if you will. Oh, it's never going to work, or life is so horrible, miserable. Why even try? And I just want to push back against that idea and say that as long as you're alive and you're breathing, there is an opportunity to keep trying. There's a door that will eventually open. It has to, right? Like, again, the people listening and even you, wisdom, we are born and purpose for so much greater before we were even placed in our mother's wombs, right? Before our mothers even knew that we were there. There was purpose that was already wrapped up into our identity, into the seed that God was bringing to this earth. And so it is up for us, because I also believe there are real forces out there that are trying to snatch that purpose away, trying to get people to live in disbelief and with little faith. But I'm just saying, just try. Because as long as you are alive, you have a special purpose and reason for living here, a gift to offer the world. And it's going to require effort on our parts, me included, just like working out, right? Everyone wants that beautiful body, but we have to invest into the workout. We have to invest into lifting weights, into eating, more vegetables and fruits and protein. We have to invest in walking more. We have to invest into saying no to the ice cream, no to the brownies, no to the cookies, or whatever your weakness is, the bread, whatever it may be. And
Yeah.
so that is life. It's all about exchange in many ways.
Yeah. When you mentioned about, when you said ask, right?
Yeah.
And you talked about seek and find, you find, search and you find, and all that, knock and it shall be opened. I remember I was privileged. I was in a meeting, yeah, and someone was talking about how he wanted to learn a skill. He moved from where he was to school, and he would love to get a place to learn a skill so he can start in a couple of some income to support himself in school and all that. And he made a statement that was like, I've asked everyone, I've searched everywhere, and I it's a really funny statement because the thing is this: when you ask, when you search, you should have receipts, right? Quote unquote receipts, right? Because people will say, I've asked everyone, and then the next question I will ask you is, okay, who are the people you've asked? And guess what? Well, but you say you asked everyone, like show me, like, oh, did you ask? Oh, you've asked this man. What did he say? And there is nothing for you to say. Like, oh, the same thing in acts of life. You acts of life. You search, you seek, you find, whatever the case or the context might be. You should have receipts that you've asked, right? Not just say, oh, because you asked one person or two persons. Like, I asked everyone. That's how everybody does. People are just wicked. They don't want to help anybody. And I'm like, what do you mean, people? Did you ask everybody in the whole world? You just asked 5 persons, and now you're saying people. Like seriously.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point.
Yeah. Wow. You get in this life. Wait, you get in this life what you have the courage to wait. What's the
Yeah,
quote again?
no
I
worries.
feel like I'm butchering it.
No worries. You get from
You
this life what you have the courage to ask for.
you get from this life what you have the courage to ask from. Right? It's strange because for me this podcast I've noticed that over time for a season I just get the same message again and again and again. And before I hopped on this call, like not too long ago, I was having a conversation with a guest, and I said that In a time where when you ask, you get the answers. When there is the assurance that if you ask, you get the answers, right? The world is for the taking for those who are courageous enough to ask the questions. And now I am, yeah, and you're telling me you get from the life what you have the question. And I'm like wondering what's going on here. Why is why is this happening? Right? But it's the truth, right? In the context of the example we're using, we weren't talking about life in necessarily, but we're talking about ChatGPT, right? Most little problems I see people having that, I don't know how do I deal with this stuff? How do I convert the time zone for this? And I'm like, literally, you could ask ChatGPT to do this stuff. And these people, they are aware of ChatGPT. It's not like, they don't have the technology, they don't know they know ChatGPT, they know what ChatGPT can do. But guess what? They're not courageous enough to ask the question, to say, okay, yeah, I should could ask and keep asking ChatGPT until I get an answer. And same thing in terms of life. If we've been given that assurance that if we ask, we'll receive, but we need to be courageous to ask.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's often simple. It's not as, sometimes people make it very complicated. And I understand, right? I think the elephant in the room too, for the listeners too listening, that maybe when you have asked, you've experienced so much disappointment that it's easier to just, keep quiet, refrain from asking, questions or being, audacious in your questions that you ask. Especially, what you're wanting to get out of life. It's easier to just, sit back and stay comfortable in your comfort zone. And it actually reminds me of another quote that I actually love. I was debating on putting this one down actually, but it's life begins at the end of your comfort zone. And that quote is by Neil Donald Walsh. Life begins at the end of your comfort zone. And to me, what that shows is disappointments are a part of life. They're almost like they're character building. To me, it's honestly character building. It's, because if we really sat back for a moment and thought, wow, if I would have gotten every single thing I wanted and hoped for, I would probably be just rotten spoiled. Or maybe their heart would be, just in a bad place, or their mindset. Those things don't necessarily build character. I think what I've found in my life and what I've observed in others is that disappointments actually build resilience and they build character. And I think because it's almost like scar tissue, it's almost what I think of that it comes to mind, it's when you have the courage to ask, you've been disappointed, the scar tissue in your heart, if you will, tells you don't ask such a bold request again. Stay low key. Only, function at the very low level. But I'm going to just push against that wisdom and say, even with the disappointments, right? Realign yourself practically, reassess your life. Okay, was that request really aligned to the type of life and person I want to be, or that I'm becoming? And if it doesn't, then, make the necessary adjustments that you need to, and then ask again, right? And if the disappointment came from questions or a series of faith-filled ideas that you did have the courage to ask for, and it's aligned with where you're supposed to be in your life, keep going. It's funny, I actually just heard from a minister yesterday at church who said that every no literally ended up pushing him closer to where God was actually calling him to be. And he said when he was an 83-year-old pastor speaking as a guest at our church here in DC. And he said as a young man, he recounted this story of when he was 24 and how he wanted something so badly. And that when it didn't come, he was going to write an angry letter. They wrote letters, I think when he was 24 was back in the 1950s or so. So, he wrote a letter or 1960s, somewhere around there. But he wrote a letter and then his dad was like, look, I wouldn't send that letter because letters get filed. Don't go that route, but rather see this as an opportunity that God is actually pushing you towards a different direction with that no. And long story short, that actually ended up being the case. And several different generations were blessed from every no that he received, but God led him to a different path.
Thank you so much for sharing that story, Kathryn. Wow. I wish we could go on with this conversation, but Ah, we have to run it up. If people are interested in, and learning more about you and what you do, where can they do that?
Yeah. So, again, I'm an executive leadership coach and strategist. And where people can find me is I have a free letter to leaders guide on my website at kathrynexecutive.com. And you can sign up via email to receive that free letter for leaders. And I also am hosting complimentary 30-minute coaching calls. So for folks who are maybe wanting to explore executive leadership coaching because they've found that it's really lonely at the top, if you will, um, I am here to partner and walk alongside those leaders who feel lonely, who feel like they can't turn to anyone else to really, hash out these tough decisions that they have to make because of all the pressure that's on their shoulders. So if that's you, I would love to sit down with you for a 30-minute real-time leadership coaching call, and talk through that. And I guess, Winston, will the website be included in the show notes or perfect? All right.
Yeah.
Well, kathrynexecutive.com. I would love to talk to y'all.
Yeah. Once again, thank you so much for being an amazing guest on the podcast.
No, thank you so much as well. I really appreciated it. And so such a blessing to be able to share this information and just my perspective with y'all. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Relatable Wisdom. If you found something meaningful in this episode, make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. If you'd like to support the show, you can do that by buying me a coffee. The link is in the show notes. Every little bit keeps the conversations going. I'm your host, Wisdom Okonkwo, and I will see you in the next one. Until then, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep growing.